Welcome to Inside the Podcast. Before we dive in today's deep discussion, please note that the Inside Podcast is an educational, spiritual, and motivational resource intended for personal growth and community building. While we frequently discuss psychological frameworks, recovery concepts, and the universal resilience model, this program does not constitute a professional counseling, clinical therapy, or medical advice. Listening to this show does not establish a counselor-client relationship. If you or a loved one are experiencing an acute mental health crisis or require clinical intervention, please reach out to a licensed healthcare professional or a local community resource like Compass Behavioral Health or Genesis Family Health. Now let's dive into today's insight. Today we're connecting the dots between severe warning and beautiful promise. And today it's Matthew 11, 20, 24, the hidden dangers of indifference in a hijacked mind. And we're looking at Matthew 11, where Jesus announces the very cities that saw his greatest miracles. But to truly understand why they fell short, we have to look at the standard he set in the Beatitudes, specifically Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Today we're going to explore what happens when we demand God's spiritual blessing but reject the posture of meekness, leaving our lives completely void of moral rectitude. We are tackling a form of spiritual blindness that is quietly devastating our culture, our churches, and our communities. It is a mindset called antinomianism. The dangerous idea that because we are covered by grace, our moral choices no longer matter. We try to use grace as an administrative loophole to pass off our choices, refusing to look at their actual moral ramifications. If you want to understand the looks in the media history, look back in the 70s. There was a brilliant avant-garde religious anthology television show, interestingly enough, also named Inside, produced by Paulus Production. In a famous 1975 episode called All Out, television contestants were put into a surreal, high-stakes game show designed to see exactly how far their greed and self-deception would take them. And I think you can get this on YouTube if you want to look it up. They wanted the prizes, they wanted the blessing, they wanted the easy shortcuts, all while trying to completely bypass the moral ramifications of the game. It was perfectly mirrors what we are talking about today. We want a cheap form of deliverance that doesn't cost us our pride. But today we're going to look at what happens when a heart grows completely numb. We're going to look at sobering warning from Jesus in Matthew 11, a profound theological truth in Romans 7, and a raw, real world look at the substances like methamphetamine and fentanyl physically mirror that spiritual ruin. Let's break it down using our core frameworks and the universal resilience model. Let's dive in. To understand the legal and historical reality of this context, we have to journey first to the ancient Rome, where the Apostle Paul was writing a mixed church of Jewish and Gentile believers. These were people who deeply understood the mechanics of legal contract. Of marriage, binding a lifelong covenant that is legally dissolved only by death. For the Jewish believer, the written code of the Torah was the ultimate governing authority. Paul's radical legal argument in Romans 7 is that the spiritual death has occurred through physical body of Jesus Christ on the cross. This death legally releases believers from the condemnation of the written law, allowing them to legally remarry to the resurrected Christ. But this brings us directly into our primary text in Matthew 11, where Jesus fiercely denounces the religious cities of Galilee, Chorazin, Bethsaida, and Capernaum. These cities sat in the front row of ultimate spiritual privilege. They watched unprecedented supernatural miracles daily, yet they remain completely indifferent. Jesus delivers a terrifying warning. If it will be more tolerable for ancient depraved places like Sodom on the day of judgment than it is for them. Why? Because the exposure demands a response. Tucked inside our beautiful freedom from the law is a massive warning. We were never set free to live in a lawless defensive neutrality. This is the spiritual meets the neurological antinomianism. Indifference happens when we refuse to weigh the total cost of sin, choosing to pass off our choices by saying it's fine, grace covers it. But the universal resilience model forces us to look at the equation through the lenses of spiritual blessing, meekness, and rectitude. The spiritual blessing is Matthew 5:5. Blessed are the meek. True meekness is never weakness. It's power under absolute control, a humble, teachable, softened, and receptive posture before God. The breakdown of rectitude. The Galilean cities demanded the power, the entertainment, and the miracles, but they lacked meekness because they lacked a softened heart to receive the grace. It could not produce the rectitude, the straight line of moral alignment, integrity, and operational character. Instead of aligning with the presence of God, they met his miracles with a hardened, defensive indifference. True logic dictates that the sin is not a minor slip-up. It is a force of absolute bankruptcy of destruction. When we look at the cross, we see the crushing weight of what it has actually cost Jesus Christ to absorb that destruction. He did not endure that agony to hand us a blank check to remain comfortable in our brokenness. He died so we look at the cross, practice absolute rectitude, and actively move away from the dark. Dual sermon. Think back to the 1975 Inside Game show episode All Out. The contestants couldn't win because their internal framework was broken. Imagine a master surveyor trying to lay down a perfectly straight foundation for a building. The standard of rectitude, he drops a plumb line, which represents the unwavering, absolute truth of God's Word. But if the ground underneath is completely frozen, rigid, and unyielding, the foundation stakes cannot be driven in. Meekness is the thawing and the softening of the ground. Chorazin and Capernaum were fundamentally rigid. They watched the miracles, but their hearts were too proud to bend, meaning the straight line of moral rectitude could never put down roots in their character. The story of the pardoned shipwreck. To understand Paul's warning in Romans 7, imagine a crew of sailors who maintained against their captain on the high seas. By a maritime law, their actions carried mandatory death sentence. They were shackled in the ship's hold, awaiting execution. Suddenly, a massive storm hits and breaks the vessel apart. The king's son swims down in the sinking hold, unlocks their chains, and drags them to the safety of the shore. But in doing so, the prince is caught under the falling mass and dies. The sailors stand on the beach and completely free from the ship, the shackles, and immediate execution. But two distinct mindsets emerge on the sand. The antinomian indifferent sailor. He stretches his arms and says, "Fantastic, the ship is gone. The law book is the bottom of the ocean and the prince is dead. There's no one left to punish us. Let's go find a new town, live wild, and do whatever we want. The rules don't apply to us anymore." He uses the rescue as an excuse for lawlessness and becomes entirely indifferent to the sacrifice made for him. The aligned rectitude sailor. He looks up at the body of the prince and says, "How can you say that? Yes, we are free from the shackles, but we belong to him now. The law that the ship didn't save us, the sacrifice did. I'm spending the rest of my days serving his family and living in the way it honors his name." And then the modern application. Let's bring this directly into modern professional lives. Imagine a brilliant but highly reckless software engineer working for a major technology firm. Over the course of a year, an engineer repeatedly violates the company's security protocols, leaks sensitive data, and behaves completely outside the employee code of conduct. Eventually, his actions trigger an internal audit. The HR and the legal department step in, laying out an airtight case against him. Under corporate bylaws, he is facing immediate termination, total forfeiture of the stock option, and a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that will completely ruin his career and financial future. He is utterly trapped by the rules he broke. Just hours before the paperwork is officially filed, the CEO of the company, who happens to be a close personal mentor, steps in. The CEO writes a personal check out of his own private funds to cover the financial damages, completely dissolves the internal legal case, and signs an unconditional corporate pardon for the engineer. The engineer walks out of the HR office completely vindicated, his job secure, and his record life totally clean. He didn't earn it, and it costs the CEO immensely. But the next morning, the engineer arrives at work, and two entirely different paths emerge. The indifferent path. The engineer walks into the office, kicks his feet up on the desk, and starts violating the exact same data protocols as before. When his co-workers remind him, he laughs and says, "It doesn't matter what I do anymore. Didn't you hear? I have an unconditional pardon from the CEO himself. The HR rules can't touch me and they can't fire me. I am free to work however I want." He treats the CEO's life-saving grace as a blank check, remain careless, arrogant, entirely indifferent to the company's mission. The aligned rectitude path. The engineer walks into the office with a profound sense of humility. He sits down meticulously, follows every single safety guideline, and dedicates his days building the best software of his career. When he asks why he's working so hard if he's already pardoned, he replies, "CEO didn't clear my record, so I could keep tearing down the company down. He cleared it because he believed in my potential to help build it up. I don't follow the protocols out of a fear of HR anymore. I follow them out of the respect of the one who saved my career." The neurological capture of the will. Let's take this concept out of abstract theological clouds and look at it on the asphalt of real life. If you want to understand how deep indifference can truly go, look at the devastating reality of methamphetamine and fentanyl addiction. Good God designed the human mind with a delicate, beautiful neurochemical architecture to evaluate cause, effect, and a consequence, to accurately weigh the cost of our actions. But these toxic substances completely hijack that machinery. By forcing an unnatural, catastrophic surge of dopamine, they completely bankrupt the mind's natural chemical reserves. Once that dopamine depletion happens, the brain prefrontal cortex, the faculty responsibility for logic, foresight, empathy, and moral judgment, is paralyzed. The individual isn't just ignoring the cause, their neurochemistry has rendered them temporarily incapable of perceiving future destruction. They become chemically and morally inept, locked in a state of absolute destructive indifference to themselves and the families who love them. Sin is a spiritual narcotic. It mimics the exact neurological capture. It promises a quick shortcut to satisfaction, an administrative loophole to pass off the choices, but in the end, by completely paralyzing our spiritual awareness until we are entirely numb to our own decay. This is why a casual pass it off view of grace fails. When a person is locked in a grip of substance or a sin pattern that has stolen their very capacity to choose alignment, they don't just need a set of rules or a superficial pardon. They need a deep systematic deliverance that restores their mind, breaks the chemical and spiritual captivity, and allows them to feel the true weight of Christ's healing power. Practical application, expanding the sanctuary of the heart. To break out of this numbness and from the pre-contemplation into active change, the universal resilience models demands a daily application. Matthew 10:16. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. And the first one is audit your receptivity. Be as wise as the serpent. Wisdom requires us to establish an interpersonal and behavioral boundaries. When you experience God's blessings, answered prayers, or scriptural truth, stop consuming it like entertainment. Humble yourself. Identify where lack of boundaries has allowed a manic stress or frustration to trigger your own automatic habits. Measure your alignments by innocent as doves, innocence maintained through daily prayer, meditation, and softened heart. True repentance means rewriting your life story by making a structural amends with the family members, dropping the defensive mask, and clearly barking the reason for your deep transformation to the people around you. The sanctuary of the yoke. The entire warning serves as essential backdrop to Jesus' next words. Come to me and I will give you rest. The resting place Jesus offers is reserved precisely for those described in Matthew 5:5. Rest is the logical consequence of the rectitude, and the rectitude is only birthed in the heart of the meek. If we remain proud, autonomous, and indifferent in the presence of the King, we forfeit his rest and inherit the consequences of our own numbness. When we serve in the new way of the Spirit, our obedience is no longer a rigid attempt to earn safety. It is a logical, beautiful overflow response of a heart that recognizes it has been brought into immense price. As we close today's episode, let the weight of the text settle. God's mighty work in your life are never just a show. They are called to bend the knee in the meekness so that he can build a rectitude in our soul. Our weight of what Jesus Christ did on the cross did not was not an endorsement for us to live an indifferent, unaligned life. He offers a cheap, superficial path to a numb heart. He died to break the physical and spiritual chains, captivity, restoring our minds so that we finally walk out of the dark. This is a benediction. May you receive the grace to cultivate the meek, receptive heart and quiet spirit. May you have the courage to stop passing off your choices, to weigh the cost of your path, and to let the power of the cross pull you into a straight line of uncompromised rectitude. May He grant you humility to step out of the indifference and into His true rest. Call to action. It is the episode challenged your posture or spoke to your struggle you or a loved one is facing today. Share it with someone who needs a spiritual realignment. Help us get these insights out of those who need them most. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the follow button, and leave a review. Now, let's take this message where it put down roots and build true community. Head over to our Inside the Podcast Facebook page right now. Find the pinned graphic for today's show and join the conversation. Drop a comment and answer this. How can we actively guard our hearts against growing indifference to the everyday blessings of God? And how do we protect our minds from the subtle numbness of the culture around us? Let's drop the mask, connect and support one another, and build an authentic community together. Until the next time, walk in truth, break the numbness, and live out the insight. And thank you, and have a blessed day.